Welcome to the Perlo Podcast. We talk construction, its people, its challenges, its opportunities. We talk to industry and trade experts, movers and shakers, and people who get buildings built right. Join us, you won't regret it. Welcome to the Perlo Podcast. We're so glad you've chosen to join us today. I am Elissa Looney, Perlo's Director of Strategic Initiatives, and I am joined here today by three of my associates to talk about careers in construction project management. They each have a little different story about how they got here, and so we're really looking forward to hearing about that today. I'm joined here today by Whitney Peterson, Project Manager, Chris McInroe, Project Director, and Broc Van Vleet, Senior Estimator, all here with Perlo. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks. Glad you guys are here with me. We're talking today about careers in construction management, and it's not just because project management is at the heart of what we do here at Perlo, but also because it's a really great career opportunity, and it's a career path that many young people really aren't exposed to. A quick search on Indeed.com showed that the United States currently has more than 5,600 openings in construction project management, and salaries average around $81,000 a year for those positions. And that doesn't include project engineer or senior project manager openings, which nearly doubles how many are on the market right now. And those salaries range from $70,000 to more than $100,000. And it's also predicted that the number of jobs in construction project management is going to increase in the United States. So with that information in mind, we want to explore a little bit more about what it's like to be in this career. And so again, super glad you guys have joined me today. I know that you all have some great stories to share. And even though I'm now in strategic initiatives, my first 12 years in the industry was running projects. So I think you'll all agree that like most careers, there are challenges, but there's a lot of opportunity as well. Talk to our audience about what you do on a daily basis. In 1 minute or less, can you describe a typical day in the life of your job? And Whitney, let's start with you.
I think no day is ever the same in project management. You're coordinating with subcontractors, communicating with owners, scheduling, helping with procurement of materials. It's just, no day is the same. There's always some problem that arises, but you kind of always figure it out, and it makes each day fun.
Yeah, that's an accurate description, I think. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, similar thoughts on that. I think each day you kind of start out with a script. You know, meetings you're supposed to be at, the items you're going to accomplish, but inevitably something's going to be thrown sideways, right? You're gonna get curveball, you're gonna get a superintendent calling, screaming, I got a problem. So a lot of times you gotta be flexible. I think any time you approach a day, you gotta have communication skills, teamwork, and problem solving. I mean, every day we're dealing with that. So it's oftentimes hard to describe, what you do in a day and you look back, what did I actually accomplish? There's a lot of reaction. You have to be on top of your game to get back on track and truly get the critical items dealt with. Yeah.
Broc, what does your day look like? A little different position for you.
Yeah, I'm on the pre-construction side, so my day is probably a little different than yours. Fair amount of sub-interaction, which you guys have as well, but more fielding questions or answering design intent or coordinating with the design team on maybe a bid that's coming up or some drawings we're looking at. Whether it's a budget or a bid project, we've got quantity takeoffs to do, reviewing quotes, interacting with owners, attending pre-construction design meetings. So any given day can have any combination of those.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of math on your side of things.
Fair amount of math.
Well, I guess your guys' too, but yeah. You're all about the math on the pre-con side. So what makes your job interesting and what makes it challenging? Let's start with Broc.
What makes it interesting for me is they're all a little different. They're all built on a different site with its own challenges, whether it's ground improvements, grade changes, site constraints. All the buildings are a little bit different. They're finding new ways to beat procurement issues and lead times and costs and stuff like that. So every project has kind of a new landscape that you start with, a new set of challenges, new way to be creative, cut costs, find better ways to do things. So they're all just a little bit different and interesting, kind of keep you on your toes, brainstorming, kind of like Chris said, finding the best way to put things together.
Yeah, I loved that when I was doing a lot of renovation work, I got to see how a whole bunch of different companies operated, right? When we're looking at their projects, we're thinking not just about how to get the building built, but how to make sure that the building works for whatever it is that they produce or make or how they operate. And so, I mean, one time I saw a junk mail station. Well, this is where all your junk mail comes from. I mean, there's a whole warehouse full of people that do that on a daily basis. So I always found that really interesting. Chris, what about you?
I think it's something that you can never truly know everything, right? In construction, you get a job done, you start building your skill set, and you've got more tools, but you'll never have a shortage of learning opportunities, right? There's always something to, new software, new relationships to build, new project that has different earthwork or different construction types. So I think that makes it challenging and interesting at the same time. I think it's a lot of multitasking, at least on my side. And if you're going to be good at a project management role, you got to master that craft. And I think there's a level of stress that you have to embrace in our industry. It's not for everyone, but I can't say I like it all the time, but I'm definitely more geared for it. So yeah, some thoughts there.
I think, just to piggyback off of that, I feel like every day I'm on my toes. Like, I'm so reactive. I'm always trying to figure out a solution to a problem that's come up. And I think especially these past few years with COVID and, material shortages and delivery dates being delayed, it's just every day there seems to be something. And it's just, finding out information and finding the best way to handle it and solve that problem. And that's what I love about it. It's just literally no day is the same. You're never bored. There's always something that you can be doing to improve or help your project further. And that's what I love about it.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit in the last episode about technologies and how that's always changing. And so there is no end to the learning because there's always something or a new process or how do we make this more efficient? Something is changing at all times. And so definitely never get bored in this line.
Yeah, that actually made me think of something. About 10 years ago, the market crashed, right? 09, 2010, right? And I remember having to get really good at running multiple TIs at once. I think we were running 6 to 8, somewhere in there, all at one time. But you had to be good to keep employed, right?
Yeah.
You fast forward to now, it's a different challenge with what you were talking about with procurement and delays. I think it's going to make estimators, project management, everyone better because you have to be more on top of your game right now. You do have to work a lot harder. So it'll be interesting to see how the next few years play out and looking back, hopefully looking back in good ways. Yeah, I think you and I were fairly fresh out of school when the last market crash happened. And so you really had to scratch and claw to land work and get it done because there weren't a lot of jobs available. Now we have a little bit of the opposite problem where there are lots of jobs out there, but it's more challenging, either because of procurement, because the sites aren't so good. In our region, there's a lack of land available, so you don't just have flat sites to build on. And then every jurisdiction has different requirements for stormwater detention or erosion control or whatever the case may be. There's different requirements. So you've got to know all of that. Sites are getting harder to build on and they want them faster.
Yeah. Those go together, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Chris and Whitney, you're more on the project management side, and Broc, you're working on the pre-construction side, which means you're looking at putting the pricing together before the buildings ever begin, and then Whitney and Chris are more on the side where they take it from the point where it's priced all the way through getting it built and completed. So let's compare and contrast those job duties a little bit. Chris, what do you think is the biggest difference between estimating and project management?
They definitely overlap. You have to be able to do both as a project manager. I think that's very important and key to hit on. I like to be involved early on when I'm estimating a project. If I'm going to run it, I want to know the ins and outs. And if there's a problem, I want to be able to say, oh, that was my fault, right? I don't want to be handed a problem. But I'd say estimating, you're going to get a lot of touches, right? There's more of a quick turn, whether it's a 2, 4, maybe it could be up to 8-week bid period, right? But you're getting lots and lots of reps. Whereas on a PM side, your rep might be, you might be stuck on a project for 1 to 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. So you get one rep at an estimate and then you got to run it. So you'll have multiple projects typically to go at the same time, but it's more of a drawn out process. I like to say on the PM side, we take maybe a napkin sketch of a building to handing over the keys, and everything in between, and there's a lot in between, you've got to be able to handle. So yeah, I think those are kind of my thoughts.
What about you, Broc?
Yeah, kind of like you said, you got to be able to do both, and I think it helps the pre-construction side, the estimating side as well, to have run projects in the past, to know the parts and pieces you're putting together and how they go together before you price them. Not always the case, but it definitely helps. And I think probably the big difference between my role and Chris and Whitney is mine's all up front. Like Chris said, I got to help problem solve, put the parts and pieces together, make sure the scopes are covered, and then pass it off. And their role is more solving problems, contracting, managing costs, managing time, and those sort of things.
Yeah, they definitely work hand in hand, and certainly you guys have to be able to meld your thinking. So if you're putting the price together on something and then you hand it off to them to run, you've got to be able to communicate effectively enough that they know what your thought process was for how to build it. And that doesn't mean we don't change, because sometimes that happens, right? Things change in the field or the project changes for whatever reason. And so we do a lot of changing. I do want to hit on kind of the planning that goes into construction management, because an awful lot of what we do is reactionary, but you can only react well if it was planned out well in the first place, right? So we spend so much time on the pre-construction side, ideally planning every part and piece of that project. That way we can react when a curveball's thrown, because it's not a matter of if a curveball's thrown. There will be something, whether it's COVID or a changing OSHA requirement or a sick building inspector, and now that throws off your schedule. I mean, there's always something. Maybe a subcontractor goes out of business and they were signed up on your project. I mean, there's just so many things, or a lot of what we get into is the building is built speculatively and then a tenant moves in and now they want to change elements of the building. So you've got to be able to react. But we have to have that planning foundation in place in order to react well.
Mm-hmm. I would say, Elissa, one of the cool things about Perlo is that you are you're given the opportunity to be an estimator and a project manager, and you get to see the estimating side and all that's put in, you know, the work that Broc does every day, but be able to execute the project schedule and the contracts. And I think that's what sets us apart from our competition, is that we get that opportunity to estimate our own work.
Yeah, that's a good distinction to make, because depending on where you're at in terms of construction companies, and a lot of times dictated by the size of the company or the size of the projects that you're putting together, you may be an estimator and a project manager all at the same time. And depending on the company, you might only be a project manager or you might only be an estimator. It really kind of depends on how the company is structured. So I think for somebody who's looking to get into the industry, that's something they might consider. And it might be something you don't know right off the bat too. You may not have gone into project management thinking, I'm going to be an estimator, but you find out that that's really where your strength is, or vice versa. So that is a good segue into our next question, which is to talk about the skills that you need for this line of work. Broc, do you want to start with what kind of skills you need for your role?
Sure, like kind of basic hard skills. A lot of, you mentioned numbers, a lot of Excel files, bid review, calculations, estimate sheets. You know, so Excel is a program, Bluebeam is a program, and just kind of math in general.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say to segue off of that, double checking. Sure. I mean, that is something that I'm doing every day. And there's times where you're being mentored early on, and maybe you have somebody to help you double check, and then then you're sent off on your own, right? And if you don't have that skill, it can be pretty scary, but just making sure it's done right, I mean, that's definitely a hard skill. And being flexible with, I can think back to when we were starting and fat tip penning, on submittals and sending it to the blueprint shop, scanning it, mailing it, and now everything is electronic, and it's changed very quickly, right? And what's the next thing? I mean, there will be a next thing. So being able to adapt and move quickly with the times, be some hard skills, soft skills. I mean, those are arguably just as important. Got to have some tough skin, self-starters, self-discipline. I mean, communication, teamwork. There's so many buzzwords that you can throw in there. Those are some good ones.
No one ever says this, but writing. We actually do a fair amount of writing with contracts, writing subcontracts, project purchase orders, proposal letters, clarifications, alternates. There's a lot of writing that goes into our job. And I think that piggybacks off of your double checking. Right. It's a lot of writing.
Yeah.
How many times do you reread an email before you send it? So many times. So, is this done right?
Yeah, change proposals, sub-change orders. Yeah. A lot of it.
Well, clarity is key, right? So much of what we do is about managing expectations and helping somebody understand that this building they're wanting to build that they can't see, what it's going to look like at the end of the day. And there's new technologies that help with that. There's a lot more 3D programs and that kind of thing, so people can get a better sense of maybe what their building's going to look like. But we have to be able to describe to them exactly what they're getting when we're done. And if you don't do that adequately, that can be a really big problem because they expect one thing, we expect another, and if those don't match at the end of the day, then there's some hard conversations. And I think hard conversations in terms of communications, being able to manage difficult conversations, sometimes conflict, those are tough. Leading meetings is another big one. There's a lot of meetings, and you want to be able to do that efficiently and make people feel good not only about the product that we're delivering, but about their experience along the way. So those are all great skills. So we've spent some time doing an overview of project management. Let's switch gears and talk a little more about how we started in construction. Diversifying the construction industry has been a big topic, especially over the last several years. We're running into labor shortages, and there's typically been sort of two pathways that people get into this industry, but usually they stem from having a relative in the industry. It's otherwise a little hard to find that this is a career path. And so there's efforts underway to change that, but people typically either go through some kind of an engineering program. Big example in our local area is Oregon State's Construction Engineering Management program. Or they have a parent or a close relative that's in the industry that points them toward it. And I myself am one of those. I actually didn't go to school for construction engineering or engineering of anything, actually. But it was my father's urging that said, I think you'd be a really good project manager, you should try it, that got me into this field. And that's often how that goes. So what about the rest of you? How did you find out about this career and get into it? Let's start with Whitney, because you actually have sort of a similar story to me.
Yeah, my dad, I'm from Maui, Hawaii, and my dad's an excavator there. And I actually had my degree in journalism and mass communications, but after doing an internship, it was something that I found out I didn't want to do. I started at Perlo as a subcontractor coordinator and worked in the estimating department, collecting sub bids and calling subs, seeing if they were bidding or not. And Galen actually told me, you should really get into project management. You're very organized and detail oriented, and that's all you need to be a really good project manager is have organizational skills and just be disciplined and driven and a good communicator most of all. And so that's what kind of led me towards project manager, was kind of a little push from Galen in that direction, that I didn't need that degree to be successful in this field.
Yeah, and it was true. And so you jumped over to special projects, yes, which I was leading at the time.
Yeah.
Worked with my department, and I think that is a similar bridge to what I took. My first project management tasks were in special projects. Also, they're a little bit smaller, quicker paced, but you learn the ropes that way pretty quickly. And you were very much a self-starter, good at asking questions, really detail oriented, and so you were able to pick up on the construction knowledge pretty easily.
Thank you.
Yeah. What about you, Chris?
Well, I started in high school. We did one of those silly little time capsule things. You bury, like, where are you going to be in 20 years? And I put in owner of a construction company. So it was, the seed was planted early, but I went to Oregon State, and when I arrived, I wasn't quite sold on it. Went into general engineering, did mechanical, electrical, got really bored with both of those, and was pretty bad at it. So my dad was in the program before it was called CEM. I can't remember what they called it. And he said, you might want to take a look at it. So I did some research. They were doing a promotion on 100% job placement out of college at the time, which sounded pretty good to me. You're going to spend all this money and I want a guaranteed job, right? So gave it a shot, ended up having a bunch of really good friends as a result of that. Go through pro school, they call it. So you kind of bond and help each other get through it. But I thought it was interesting. My dad, he went on a totally different path. He went down business and totally unrelated to the construction industry. So I think the point there, though, is you go to get a degree, it can open up different avenues, right? Mm-hmm. Mine just so happened to be construction, but yeah, it's been, I interned at Granite, which is a heavy civil company, while I was still in school, and I hated it. I mean, road construction, nothing to take away from excavators, but I just wasn't, I wanted to see everything with a building. And so interned at Perlo, got fortunate enough to get offered a job by Jeff and Galen while I was still in school, and took it, so.
Yeah, and I think we were in the midst of some growing pains when you started, and you ended up without an office at first too, right? Weren't you in the hallway at the time when you first started?
I was in the hallway, underneath the stairs, next to the bathroom, so it was, started at the bottom. So.
I had a hallway seat as well.
Yeah.
You did?
It's kind of like a rite of passage if you can get past the hallway, right?
Yeah. I started under the stairs also, my very first summer.
Door opens, you gotta get all your papers so they don't blow away. Yeah, for sure.
Look at us now. Broc, what about you? Any hallway stories?
No good hallway stories to top that, sorry. My dad's a retired structural engineer, so I was exposed to construction from the design side, I guess early. Exposed to blueprints, got some job site tours and stuff, when they'd have a panel pick or something and he had the opportunity to pull me out of school, I'd get to go see those. Went to Oregon State, actually started in civil engineering, got a couple years in, the math and the science, and I know I'm a numbers guy, I'm in estimating, but it was a little too much. The design, just sitting at a desk grinding it out was not the path I wanted to go, so I found CEM, switched, where when I was running work, there's a good balance of in the office versus in the field, getting to see what you're building. And we still get that opportunity for job site walks, whether you guys put them together for the company or our department picks one each month to go tour. So similar story, got exposed via my family and changed paths along the way, and here I am.
I am hearing a constant here too, which is the value of internships, because sounds like kind of all of you started down one path and the internship showed you what you didn't want to do. We've certainly had interns who they find the same thing. It either confirms that this is what they want to do, or it confirms that this isn't quite what they want to do. And I do think, project management takes many forms, and you can be a project manager in many industries. And in construction, you can be a project manager for a specific trade, or more for a general contractor like we are, where you do get to see the whole picture as opposed to just sort of one piece of it. And we need all of those. And so some people end up with more of a passion for one trade or another, and some people like kind of the bigger picture. And we certainly love the people who specialize in one thing because they're the experts and we get to learn from them, and vice versa. So interesting parallel that all of you had an internship that helped kind of steer you into your final destination. So let's have a little fun here. Share with us a favorite story from your career, or a favorite relationship maybe that you've developed because of it. What opportunities have you had that you wouldn't otherwise have if you were in a different career?
Am I up?
Sure.
Sorry. Yeah.
I didn't pick on anybody that time.
I got to think on this.
Okay. I've got a favorite job a project we did. It was for Lamb. Yeah, we got approached that we had a very tight timeline, and it was a 3-story build out for land research, 84,000 feet, and they basically needed it done in 3 months. And no one said we could do it. And I didn't think we could do it at first either, but we basically pulled all our subcontractors into one room, and it was Tyler Kopstead and Adam Smelly with myself, and we said failure's not an option, and here's the end date. Okay, we need ideas on how to get there. And it was crazy, but we actually pulled it off. And I look back, and the stress there was crazy. Like, I was twitching, and the owner was really on top of us, and I got a call from the owner the day of the grand opening. There was rubble at the front door. I grabbed a broom, went down there, within a couple minutes, got it cleared. And so from there, they've become a repeat client of ours. So those are the type of experiences where it's hard in the moment, being able to look back, and it's gratifying. That's what I love, and it makes a difference. So that was one that stood out to me.
I think my favorites are the relationships I've built, especially with superintendents in the field, and just like having a superintendent that you click with and just gel with. It's so fun working on a project with a superintendent that you just gel with and work well together with. And I'm on a project right now out in Gresham, and we're just on the same wavelength, and we just crank things out, and it's so fun to just be a part of that process. And we're there for each other, and he helps me when I need help, and vice versa. And that's what I love about it, is just the relationships that you build, like within the company and also with owners, and that repeat client feel. Like when you get another call from that client and how good that feels, like it's a big pat on the back.
Yeah, that's a great point. I will say I had one project that was with my favorite bread company. And every time I went to a project meeting, they handed me bread straight off the production line. And I tell you what, their bread is even better when it's perfectly fresh. And that was my favorite. Broc, what about you?
I think I'm along the lines of Whitney, but maybe extend outside the workplace. My first project out of school in 2007, worked with an electrician, spent some time outside of work with him, riding motorcycles, and talked to him a couple times a year still. He started his own company. I moved on a couple times, and so just kind of relationships with like-minded people in the industry that you can build personal relationships with.
There's a lot of that, and a lot of building relationships over time and growing in the industry with people who maybe started at a similar time as you, or we just had a good mentor of mine that just retired, that I sat down with her when I first entered the industry to talk to her about women in construction and what I should do, and she gave me great advice. And now I'm watching her retire, and there's one piece of me that's really sad, and there's another piece of me that's so happy for her to see her end a really successful career. And those kinds of relationships we get to build every day. All right, what makes this job fun or fulfilling? I think those kind of go along the same lines. And why is that important? I want to start with Chris.
Yeah, that one's pretty easy here at Perlo. I mean, to be honest, we're always there's always something, right? And what stands out to me is the Turkey Bowl. We just did it last year, I guess. And just, it was muddy. It was crazy muddy, right? And you're going to be sore the next day, and you know it, but just the camaraderie of, sweating and bleeding, and some people got hurt, but everyone just showed up. I mean, that kickball.
That was my jam.
Yeah, everyone was, you see the competitive side of people come out, not wanting to lose, but I love bonding outside of the normal work, and you have to, right? If you just grind and it's a work, you're just gonna diminish slowly, right? So you gotta have a balance, and it's important that you put time in and do it with not only just internally, but owners, right? Go to lunch, have some beverages, whatever you want to call it. So
I think what fulfills me is being able to train like PMs and kind of mentor younger project managers or project engineers. I just find like so much joy teaching them what I've learned from people like Chris, Greg, and Jordan, and sharing the knowledge that I've learned over the years with them, and just to see them grow year by year. It's just so cool. Like, that's what makes me want to get up in the morning and come to work, is to just see those people grow and develop. It's really cool.
I feel like it's really satisfying when you start to become a mentor to younger folks, because it helps you realize how much you've learned. You're learning little by little every day, every month, every year, and you don't really realize how much it adds up until you get somebody who's a fresh face and they know nothing, and all of a sudden you know a lot compared to them, and it's hard to quantify until you see that gap. What about you?
Inside the office, it's the variety of projects we get to see. We get a price, we get a build. The teamwork, no one's turned me away when I've come with schedule questions or constructability questions or needing help putting something together on bid day. Great team. And then, kind of like Chris said, this company with the extracurriculars and happy hour, or doing something on the weekend, or stopping work to go do something as a company, team build a little bit. Makes it worthwhile every day.
Chris, you talked earlier about stress, and that there is a certain level of stress that comes with this job, because it's high stakes, it's high dollars, it's pressure for timelines. You got to know a lot of information. You got to be able to react quickly if there's issues. You have to be able to break that up with fun or camaraderie and relationships to make it worthwhile. I think this career can be really lucrative, but that comes with a certain amount of stress. But if we can make our work day enjoyable, even though we're working hard, it's so much more fulfilling. And
you'll be more productive if you can do that, right?
Yep.
It's hard to think about it that way, and there's a lot of times where I just want to grind. I don't want to stop. I don't want to go get water, right?
Yes.
But it's that taking that step to breathe, and once your mind steps away from something for even a night or a few hours, there's so many times where I can think of, I totally think it differently now, right?
Yes.
I'm just taking a little bit of time.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've been out walking my dogs or hiking or in the shower even, and all of a sudden the solution to whatever problem I've been thinking on comes to me. All right, now I've got it. And so you do have to have that time to step back. Or I don't know how many times I've sat with any one of you with, here's my issue, and we start brainstorming, and pretty soon we have a better solution than any one of us would have come up with on our own. And because we have good relationships here and in this business with our subs and that kind of thing, we can have conversations like that all the time.
Yeah, you made me think of something, the way our office is set up, and the way it was designed, we wanted to enforce collisions, right? You're walking and you collide with somebody and you talk, right? But what that brings is a power of teamwork, right? You get different perspectives, other people's thoughts. Hey, have you thought of this? And I can't think of, there's too many examples of how I've come to a better solution by the help of others.
Yeah.
And everyone's available and willing, which is really special.
Yeah. So if we have any young people listening in, or maybe their parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and they want to expose the youth in their life to this industry, let's talk about why they should consider that and how somebody might go about it. What advice would you give to a young person that's thinking about this as a future career? Broc, you want to get us started with this one?
You hit on it earlier. Someone that's in the position to maybe pick up an internship is an outstanding way. It's a couple-month trial for both the individual and the company. It's a great way to see, at least here, all the parts and pieces, field and office of what we do on a daily basis. And I think by the end of that internship, you'd have a good idea of whether or not it's for you.
That was my answer too, just like internship and trying things out and talking to people in the industry. I know for me, when I think of a good project manager, it's somebody who's organized and detail-oriented and disciplined. And I think if you fall under those categories, you'll be successful in almost any job you do, but especially the construction industry. So just talking to people and kind of getting your foot in the door is always a good way to start.
Yeah, I was going to say connections, networking. You've heard the cliche, it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? So that's huge, building that base as soon as you can. Internships, 100% agree. I would also say, you talked about what would you tell your kids, or what your kid says, hey, how's your job, Dad? I would say you got to look within to define what you're passionate about, right? And if passion aligns with building and construction, follow that dream, right? If it's not, then I would pursue whatever your passion is and try to align your career with that. Mm-hmm. So if the question does come, I couldn't tell them, yeah, it's for you, right? That's up for them to decide. So
I think in smaller ways too, if for some reason there aren't larger internships available, I know we've done a lot of informational interviews with people before. In fact, that's how a couple of our hires have come to be, is maybe they were in a different industry or just a different piece of real estate or something, and they said, hey, I want to learn more about what project management is, and we'll go sit down over coffee and chat about it. And in one case, I hired somebody from that interview because we realized that what they're good at and what we need aligned really well. And so informational interviews can be great. And if there's anything that I've learned, especially in developing some of this content for our newsroom and that kind of thing, it's that people really like to talk about what they do and how they do it. And there's sort of no better compliment than asking somebody about their job. So if you get the chance to just connect with a company that will do an informational interview, most people are going to be more than happy to talk with you about that. And then there are some organizations out there too working to expose more young people to the industry. Girls Build comes to mind. That one is specific to young girls. But there are some other organizations that work to expose kids to these things. And then, of course, there are public schools in particular that are working to put more career technical education programs into their schools. My daughter actually is taking welding, just finished up a welding class as a freshman in high school. It was such great exposure. And there's more of those starting to be around in our school program. So if you're a parent and you're involved in your school, you might think about trying to get your school to bring a program like that in. But people are generally really open to talking about what they do. So my advice would be just reach out. It's rare that you're going to get somebody saying no, that they're not interested in talking to your kid. Is there anything else that comes to mind from any of you about what people should know about careers in project management?
I mean, you're going to come out, if you choose this career path, and it's going to be very overwhelming. You'll be working with salty people that have been doing this for 30 years, and you're the young buck and don't know what the hell you're doing, right? And so you got to be humble, and you got to earn their respect and their trust, and it takes a lot, right? And so the first 2 years, you're just drowning, right? Maybe even up to 5. You're learning, you're finding your footing, and then you start perfecting it. This is Galen kind of told me the stages of PM, right? 5 to 10 years, you're getting pretty good at it. And then maybe 10 to 15, you're becoming an expert. And then 15 and beyond, I don't know what he said, but I'll get there when I get there. But so yeah, there's definitely a career progression. And I always come back to, with anything in life, how bad do you want it? Because if you want something bad enough and are willing to work, you can do whatever you want, right? So just set a goal and work towards it.
That's such a great point, because I think one of the things that is true about this industry is the sky's kind of the limit. You might be a project manager, but then you might be managing people as more of a director level, or moving on a path to ownership, or discovering a new market that you want to get into and learning a different building type. And maybe you start out with a subcontractor and then you move to a general contractor, and you get to see that whole scope is at your fingertips if you want it. And so while it can be overwhelming at times, it can be stressful at times, there's also just an awful lot of fulfillment that comes with the role. And I also think that our industry is starting to adjust a little bit to where we're a little better about training folks proactively, getting away from the sink or swim mentality, getting away from the old school, being mean to people on job sites. That stuff's starting to go by the wayside, and it's a more inclusive environment, and there's a lot of opportunities for everybody.
I think I can't speak for other construction companies, but at Perlo, you get to choose your destiny. Like, you can do as little and as much as you want, and you can go as high as you want. Like, I just think of myself as a sub coordinator. I never would have thought that I'd be a project manager. And Perlo just always gives you an opportunity to grow and succeed as much as you want. And there is no limit to your success here if you put in the work and you're dedicated and disciplined. And that's what I love about working here and being a project manager.
All right, final question, rapid fire, yes or no? Would you encourage your children to go into this line of work?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes is all around. There you go. Thank you, Chris, Whitney, Broc. I really appreciate that you were here today and spent your time chatting with me. For our listeners, if you've been thinking about a career in project management, we hope that this has given you some food for thought and clarity about what it is that we do and whether it's something you'd like to pursue. If you've got more questions or comments for us, please send us a message. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or through our website at perlo.biz. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Elissa.
Thank you for joining us for the Perlo Podcast. Visit us online at perlo.biz. Subscribe to catch our future episodes and join us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube to discuss all things construction. And finally, work hard, do what's right, and make it fun. Until next time.